My name is Marissa Whitaker, and I'm 31 years old. On paper, I'm doing fine. I live in Queens. I own a small but beautiful collection of clothes that I designed myself, and my name has appeared once in tiny font on a corner of a Vogue page. I'm a senior designer at a boutique firm in Manhattan, inching toward my own label. I pay my rent on time. I have a 401k. I used to have a boyfriend who loved me, or at least tried to, between my late night sketch sessions and my family's disasters. If you looked at my resume, you'd say I won. If you looked at my brother's back the night everything changed, you'd say none of it was worth the cost. I grew up in a two-story house in suburban Virginia, the kind with freshly mulched flower beds and neighbors who waved from perfectly edged lawns. From the outside, we were textbook respectable. Dad worked at an insurance company. Mom was a senior executive at a healthcare consulting firm. My younger brother Kelvin and I were bright kids with promising futures. Mom loved that phrase, promising futures. She said it like a contract she'd personally drafted. She picked our futures the way some people pick wallpaper, decisively, permanently, without asking what we liked. I was the trial run. I've decided you'll be a lawyer, she told me when I was 13, as if she was announcing dinner. You argue well. You're smart. You'll make partner by 40 if you don't waste time. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my algebra homework spread out in front of me, a half-finished sketch of a dress hidden beneath the worksheets. My pencil paused. You decided? I asked. Yes, I didn't work this hard for my children to be mediocre. It wasn't a discussion, it was a verdict. From that day on, every corner of my life was curated for the future attorney version of me. Debate club, mock trial, summer leadership programs with glossy brochures full of kids in blazers. She filtered my friends, my activities, my schedule. Design was not on her approved list. Art was a hobby. Happiness was a luxury to be pursued only after stability and status were secured. Dad, Raymond, just nodded along with whatever she said. He worked long hours and came home with a tired smile and a loosened tie, his presence like background furniture, necessary, not disruptive. When Mom laid out her plans, he'd murmur, "Your mother knows best, Marissa," like a reflex. He wasn't cruel. He was worse in some ways. He was absent while sitting right there at the table. By the time I turned 18, Mom had her victory speech ready. I'd been accepted into a decent pre-law program 2 states away. She threw a party that looked like a fundraiser, invited everyone she knew, and told them all about her daughter, the future attorney. She made a toast in the dining room under the chandelier she loved so much. To Marissa, she said, crystal glass lifted high, proof that hard work and the right guidance pay off. The right guidance. She meant her. What she didn't know, what I'd been too afraid to say out loud, was that I'd also applied to fashion design schools behind her back. I'd sent my portfolio in under the soft yellow light of my bedroom at night, while everyone slept, sketches of gowns, tailored coats, silhouettes I couldn't get out of my head. I mailed the applications myself on the way to school, my heart pounding like I was committing a crime. Parsons said yes. They didn't just say yes, they offered a partial scholarship. The day the letter came, I sat on my bed and stared at the words until they blurred. I could almost see 2 lives branching out in front of me. In one, I wore suits and memorized case law and performed my mother's idea of success. In the other, I ruined everything and chose myself. I told her 2 weeks before graduation. She was at the kitchen island, cutting vegetables with the precision of a surgeon. The acceptance letter lay on the counter between us, the Parsons logo like a dare. "Mom," I said. My voice sounded small in my own ears. "I'm not going to the pre-law program." She didn't look up. "Excuse me?" "I'm going to Parsons, for fashion design." The knife stopped mid-slice. She lifted her head slowly, eyes cold and flat. "Parsons." She said it like I'd announced I was joining a circus. "You're throwing away your future." "It's not throwing it away," I whispered. "It's choosing a different one. I want to design." "You want to be some struggling artist?" she snapped. "Instead of having a respectable profession? Marissa, I gave you everything. I shaped your path, and this is how you repay me?" "It's my life," I managed. My hands were shaking. "I want to be happy." She laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that made my stomach turn. "Happy doesn't pay bills, Marissa. Happy doesn't give you respect." For 3 months after that, she didn't speak to me unless it was absolutely necessary. No good mornings, no good nights. She walked past me in our own house like I was a draft she'd thrown away. Thanksgiving that year was silent. Christmas was worse. She invited extended family, made a show of carving the turkey, and slipped little daggers into every conversation. "Well, you know Marissa," she'd say with a brittle smile. "She decided she knows better than her parents. She's playing with clothes in New York instead of building a real career." Aunt Caroline tried to defend me once. "From what I hear, she's doing well, Denise. Parsons is—" "You don't understand the importance of legacy and achievement," Mom cut her off. "I didn't raise my children to settle." I sat at the end of the table, cheeks burning, shoving mashed potatoes around my plate. My younger brother Kelvin watched me with wide, worried eyes. Back in New York, life was hard and beautiful and mine. Parsons nearly broke me and saved me at the same time. I pulled all-nighters for critiques, survived on cheap takeout and bad coffee, and cried in bathroom stalls when professors shredded my work. But when a piece came together, when a line, a seam, a silhouette finally matched what I saw in my head, I felt more alive than I ever had in any debate club. I found a tiny apartment in Queens with a roommate, a fire escape that doubled as a balcony, and a closet that was mostly bolts of fabric. I met a guy named Ethan at a gallery opening. Kind eyes, ink on his fingers, a photojournalist who understood chasing a dream instead of a salary. He became my boyfriend slowly, then all at once, coffee dates that turned into late nights, arguments about lighting and art, his steady presence when my mother's silence echoed too loudly. He met Mom exactly once at a strained Thanksgiving visit. She nodded at him, assessed his shoes, then never mentioned him again. I graduated with honors, landed a job at a boutique design firm in Manhattan, and started building a life that looked nothing like the one she'd planned for me. My apartment was small, but it was mine. My work was demanding, but it filled me with a satisfaction that no mock trial ever had. I told myself that one day she'd see, that she'd look at my work, at my independence, and realize success comes in different shapes. I was wrong. If anything, her disappointment hardened into something denser, a grudge she polished and displayed whenever family was around. But somewhere in the middle of her hating my choices, she found a new project. Kelvin. He was 5 years younger than me, quiet where I was loud, soft where I'd learned to sharpen myself. He loved music. From the moment he picked up a guitar at 9, it never left his hands. His room was a chaos of sheet music, posters of jazz legends, and a cheap amp he'd saved up for. He'd send me scratchy recordings on my phone. "Listen to this, Riss," he'd text. "I think I finally nailed that solo." He was good. Not hobby good. Scary good. So when Mom announced one day that Kelvin would be a surgeon, top schools, prestigious residencies, a medical career laid out like a military campaign, I felt something twist in my chest. I recognized that tone, the certainty, the entitlement. I recognized the look in Kelvin's eyes too, the one he wore whenever she talked about his future, a subtle flinch, like each word was a stone on his chest. I should have known then. I should have understood that she wasn't done molding her children into trophies. She'd simply moved on to her next canvas. And this time, the cost would be blood. Kelvin was 14 when Mom started her second great campaign. By then, I was fully installed in New York. Parsons graduate, junior designer, hustling at a boutique firm, splitting rent in Queens, and eating more instant noodles than anyone with a college degree should admit. The distance between our lives felt like more than states on a map. But every time my phone buzzed with his name, I was right back in that house, sitting under that chandelier. He called one Tuesday night while I was pinning muslin to a dress form in my living room. Ethan was on the couch, editing photos, the TV murmuring in the background. "Hey, rockstar," I answered, tucking my phone between my shoulder and ear. "What's up?" There was a long silence on the other end. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded smaller. "Can you come home soon?" he asked. I frowned. "What's going on?" He hesitated. "It's nothing. Just, I miss you, that's all." He was lying. I knew he was lying. But deadlines were looming. My boss had just handed me a complicated client, and the idea of going back to that house made my stomach knot. "I'll try," I said. "Maybe in a few weeks?" "Okay," he replied, and I heard the word he didn't say. Never. A week later, Mom called me. "Your brother is starting pre-med prep classes this summer," she announced. No hello, no how are you. "I've arranged biology tutoring and a place at a medical camp. When he applies for college, he'll be ahead of everyone." "Does Kelvin want that?" I asked. "Don't be ridiculous, Marissa. He's 14. He doesn't know what's good for him." I knew what I wanted at 14. "And look where that got us," she snapped. "Don't start." She hung up before I could answer. The following weekend, guilt finally shoved me onto a train. I packed a small bag, kissed Ethan goodbye, and told him I'd be back Sunday. "Call me if you need me," he said, his hand warm on the back of my neck. "Seriously, anytime." "I'll be fine," I lied and boarded. By the time I got off in Virginia, my shoulders were tight from clenching. The ride from the station to the house felt like rewinding a movie I'd promised myself never to watch again. The moment I stepped through the front door, I felt it, a tension in the air, thick and metallic. Mom barely looked up from her laptop at the dining table. "You're early," she said. "Nice to see you too," I replied. Dad appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He gave me a tired smile, hugged me a little too tightly, like someone clinging to a life raft. "Good to have you home, kiddo," he murmured. I noticed the dark smudges under his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped. "Where's Kelvin?" I asked. "In his room," Dad said, glancing up the stairs. "He's studying." The pause around that word told me everything. I dropped my bag in my old bedroom and barely had time to take in the faded posters, the ghost of my teenage self still clinging to the walls, before Kelvin slipped inside and shut the door behind him. He looked older, somehow. Same lanky frame, same tousled hair, but there was a tightness around his mouth I didn't recognize. His brown eyes, usually bright when he talked about music, were red-rimmed and glassy. "Hey," I said softly, "come here." He folded into my arms like he'd been holding himself together for too long. "Riss," he muttered into my shoulder. "I can't do this anymore." Alarm shot through me. "Do what?" He pulled back, scrubbing at his eyes. "The pre-med prep, the tutoring, the camps, all of it. I hate it. I wake up every morning feeling sick." I sat down on the edge of the bed, patting the spot beside me. "Talk to me." He sat, elbows on his knees, hands twisting together. "I want to study music," he said. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been damming them up for months. "Mr. Henderson, my music teacher, he said I could audition for Berklee's summer program next year, or maybe the year after, if we save up. He thinks I have a real shot. He says people actually make careers out of this." "That's amazing," I said automatically. "Kel, that's—" "Mom said music is a hobby, not a career," he interrupted, voice cracking. "She said she's not wasting my potential like she did with you." The words landed like a slap. I flinched. "She said if I keep talking about Berklee, she'll sell my guitar," he whispered. For a second, I saw it. Mom lifting his guitar the way she'd once lifted my sketchbooks and torn them in half. The look on his face as the one thing that made him feel like himself disappeared. Anger flared, hot and sharp, but alongside it came something else. A familiar, cowardly thought. "It's not that bad yet. She's just talking. She won't actually do it." "Have you tried talking to her properly?" I asked slowly. "Like, really explaining what it means to you?" He stared at me. "I tried last week. She said I sounded like you, like I'd been poisoned by your selfishness." I swallowed. "What about Dad?" I asked. "Have you told him how bad it is?" Kelvin let out a hollow laugh. "Dad just says Mom knows best. I asked him to come to my spring concert, the one where I had a solo. He came. Afterwards, he said it was nice, but that I should focus on my real studies." Shame crawled up my throat. I had escaped. He was still there, carrying the weight I'd managed to shrug off. "Listen," I said, grasping for something that sounded like wisdom. "You're still young. Maybe just go along with some of it for now. Keep practicing music on the side. When you're 18, you can choose." "I can't wait 4 years, Marissa," he said quietly. "I'm dying inside right now. She's already planning my entire next 8 years. Medical camps, SAT prep, pre-med programs. She won't even let me audition for the advanced jazz ensemble next year. She said it's a distraction." His fingers shook. "I don't feel like I have a life. I feel like I'm playing a part in her show." The words should have been enough to make me stand up, march downstairs, and blow up the whole house if I had to. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'll talk to her, okay? I'll try to reason with her. Just hang in there a little longer." It was the worst sentence I've ever spoken. We spent the rest of the evening hiding in my room, listening to old recordings of his solos, talking about jazz and dreams and cities he wanted to perform in. For a few hours, the house felt less like a trap and more like a memory. I didn't talk to Mom. I told myself it was because the timing was bad, because she was in one of her moods, because a confrontation would only make things worse. The truth? I was scared. I had built a fragile, hard-won peace in New York, and I didn't want to light a match near it. On Sunday, I hugged Kelvin on the driveway. "I'll call you this week," I promised, "and I'll figure something out, okay?" He nodded, but his eyes were dull. "Sure." I got on the train back to Manhattan and let my life swallow me whole. A big client moved up their deadline. my boss started sleeping at the office, and I slipped into that frantic rhythm of sketches, fittings, and late nights. Ethan asked how my visit had gone. I said fine, and changed the subject. I told myself Kelvin could handle it a little longer. I told myself Mom would calm down. I told myself I'd call him that weekend. 3 weeks later, my phone rang just after 5 p.m. I was at my desk, hunched over technical flats, my eyes burning. Natalie, my cousin, flashed on the screen. I picked up, frowning. Hey, Nat, what's... You need to come home right now, she said. Her voice was shaking. My heart dropped. What happened? Just come, she said. It's Kelvin. The room tilted. For a split second, I couldn't feel my hands. Is he... The word dead lodged in my throat like glass. Is he okay? Silence. Then, he's alive. Just come. The next hour is a blur in my memory. Grabbing my bag with no idea what I'd packed, calling my boss to mumble something about a family emergency, Ethan's face going pale when I choked out, It's Kelvin. I'm driving you, he said immediately. You have a shoot. I don't care. We drove through New Jersey and Delaware with the speedometer doing things it shouldn't. The sky darkened around us, highway lights smearing into streaks. I stared out the window, gut churning, replaying every conversation I'd had with Kelvin, every warning sign I'd smoothed over. This is my fault, a voice in my head whispered. You left him there. You told him to hang on. At some point, Ethan reached over and took my hand, his thumb tracing circles over my knuckles. He's tough, he said. He's got you. Whatever it is, you'll handle it. I didn't answer. I was already cataloging possibilities, an accident, an overdose, a breakdown, each worse than the last. When we pulled up to the house, Natalie was waiting on the front porch, arms hugged around herself. Her face was pale, her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. I barely said goodbye to Ethan before I was out of the car. Where is he? I demanded. Upstairs, she said. Your mom's in the living room. Your dad? He's still at work. The way she said Mom made my blood run cold. I pushed past her and stepped into the house. The air felt wrong, too still, like the silence after an explosion. Mom sat on the sofa, hands folded, eyes fixed on the TV, which wasn't even turned on. She looked up as I walked in. You came, she said. No surprise, no guilt, just irritation, like I'd interrupted something important. My heart pounded. What did you do? Her lips tightened. Go check on your brother if you're so concerned. I didn't wait for more. I took the stairs 2 at a time, each step heavier than the last, dread settling in my bones. At the top of the stairs, outside Kelvin's bedroom door, I paused. On the other side of the wood, I could hear it, the faint, ragged sound of someone trying not to cry. I opened the door. What I saw on that bed would haunt me for the rest of my life. Kelvin was face down on his bed, shirt off, his small frame trembling with every breath. For half a second, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then the world snapped into horrible focus. His back, my God! Dark purple welts crossed his shoulder blades like railroad tracks. Some were swollen, raised. Some were broken, split open, blood still seeping in thin, awful lines. Others were already turning a sickening blue-black. There were so many, too many for a single strike, too many for any excuse. My knees nearly buckled. Kelvin, I whispered, stepping forward with shaking hands. Kel. Oh, God. Kel. He turned his head just slightly. Tears streaked his cheeks, mixing with sweat. His voice was barely a whisper. I told her I didn't want the medical camp, he said, breath hitching. I told her Mr. Henderson helped me apply for the Berkeley workshop. I thought, if I explained everything, she'd at least listen. A sob tore out of him, not loud, just broken. She said I was ungrateful, said I was being influenced by you, said you poisoned me. His voice cracked. She grabbed Dad's belt, the big leather one. She told me to stop talking, and when I tried to make her understand, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Something in me cracked, not a gentle break, a violent one, like bone under too much pressure. Behind me, footsteps creaked on the stairwell. I turned. Mom stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, her posture straight and composed. Her eyes weren't filled with regret or panic. They were cold, impatient. This doesn't concern you, Marissa, she said. I felt something primal roar inside my chest. You beat him until he bled. She raised her chin. I disciplined my son. He was disrespectful and needed consequences. He's 14. He knows nothing about life. He thinks playing guitar is a career. He is not throwing away his future like you did. I stepped between her and the bed. My voice dropped to something low and dangerous, something I barely recognized. You're not touching him again. Her mouth tightened. Get out of my house. No, I said. Not without Kelvin. He's my son. He stays here. Before I could respond, another voice cut through the doorway. Denise. Natalie. Fierce. Steady. Standing just behind Mom, arms crossed. This is abuse, she said. You need to look at him. Look at what you did. Mom spun on her. Your mother raised you to question your elders. My mother raised me to recognize cruelty, Natalie snapped. And this is cruelty. Mom's face twisted, but this time I didn't let her redirect the fire. I pulled out my phone. Her expression changed instantly, a flash of real fear. What are you doing? She demanded. Calling Dad, I said. Then I'm taking Kelvin to the hospital. You will not. But I was already dialing. Dad answered on the third ring, his voice groggy, tired. Marissa, what's... It's Kelvin, I said. My voice shook so hard I could barely form words. Dad, you need to come, now. I described the injuries. I told him the truth, every awful inch of it. There was a long silence on the line. Then, quietly, I'll meet you at the hospital. Mom's face was white with fury. You're overreacting. This is a family matter. No, I said, guiding Kelvin upright and helping him pull on a loose shirt that wouldn't scrape his wounds. This is assault. He winced with every movement. I wanted to wrap him in something soft, something safe. Instead, all I could do was steady him with shaking hands. Marissa, he whispered. It hurts. I know, I whispered back. I'm getting you out of here. Ethan was waiting outside the house, engines still running, eyes widening when he saw Kelvin staggering behind me. Jesus, he whispered. Drive, I said. We got Kelvin into the back seat as gently as possible. Natalie climbed in beside him, holding his shoulders so he wouldn't sway against the rough upholstery. Mom stormed onto the porch. You're kidnapping him, she shrieked. You're all insane. He's coming back. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. We're going to the hospital, I said. Try to stop me. And Ethan pulled away before she could answer. The staff at Virginia General took one look at Kelvin and immediately moved. Within minutes, a gurney, 2 nurses, a doctor with a grim expression, a clipboard being filled out faster than my eyes could follow. They ushered us into an exam room. I had to wait in the hallway while they cleaned the wounds and documented everything. Natalie sat beside me, hands shaking. Ethan stood behind my chair, his hand on my shoulder. I barely felt it. My entire attention was laser-focused on the door where Kelvin had disappeared. When Dad arrived, breathless, pale, he looked like someone had ripped years off his life. He stared at the hallway, then at me. Is it bad? He croaked. I couldn't speak. I could only nod. His face crumpled. I should have been there, he whispered. I should have. The exam room door opened. Family? A nurse asked. All 3 of us stood at once. The doctor, Dr. Patel, walked out holding a chart. Her expression was tight and professional, the kind doctors wear when they're holding back anger. We've treated the lacerations, she said. Some are deep. A few could scar. We're monitoring for infection. Dad swayed. Ethan grabbed his elbow. Dr. Patel continued. Because of the nature of the injuries, we've notified Child Protective Services. They'll be speaking with all of you shortly. I exhaled, a shaky, almost relieved breath, because this meant it wasn't just my voice against Mom's. It was official. It was documented. It was real. The CPS worker arrived less than an hour later. Sharon Martinez, mid-40s, calm eyes, hair pulled into a neat bun. She introduced herself to each of us, then interviewed us separately. She spoke to Kelvin first. He came out with red eyes, but his shoulders just a little less tense. Then Dad. He returned, wiping his face. Then me. Sharon sat across from me in a small consultation room, pen poised above her notebook. Marissa, she said gently, start at the beginning. I told her everything. About my childhood, about law school, about Parsons, about the Cold War, the controlling behavior, the years of manipulation, about Kelvin's love for music, his fear, his dreams, about the phone call from Natalie, about the welts, the blood, the belt. By the end, my voice was ragged. Sharon took notes the entire time, her face unreadable, but her posture attentive. When I finished, she closed the notebook. Thank you, she said. You did the right thing bringing him here. I swallowed hard. What happens now? Kelvin cannot return home tonight, she said. Given the severity of the injuries and the testimony, it's not safe. Dad pressed a hand to his forehead. Foster care? There is an emergency foster placement available, Sharon said. Or, she looked between Dad and me. If a relative can take him temporarily, that's often the preference. I'll take him, I said immediately. I have a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. He can stay with me. Sharon turned to Dad. Mr. Whitaker? Dad's voice was hoarse. Yes, Marissa can take him. He should be with family. Sharon nodded. Then that's what we'll do. Kelvin slept in my guest room. I slept not at all. I sat at my laptop until sunrise, researching custody laws, protective orders, emergency guardianship. Every article, every forum post, every legal resource I could find. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 7 a.m., I called a family lawyer recommended by a coworker, Diana Walsh. The earliest appointment she had was that afternoon. He needs protection, I told her over the phone, my voice breaking. She'll try to get him back. Diana paused, then said, "Come in, bring everything." Later, after Kelvin woke and managed to eat a piece of toast, we took a cab to Diana's office. She listened. She asked for the photos. She asked for the medical reports. She asked for every detail, every memory, every piece of context. Then she leaned back, looked me in the eye, and said, "This is going to get ugly, Marissa. Your mother will fight. They always fight. But the evidence is overwhelmingly on your side. With what I'm seeing here, we have a very strong case." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months, because this wasn't just a crisis anymore. It was a battle. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight my mother. If you had told me years earlier that my mother, the woman who curated our lives like trophies on a shelf, would one day unravel in public, I wouldn't have believed you. She'd always seemed inevitable, an immovable fact of our childhood, a woman who bent reality around her will. But abusers who build their power on fear forget one thing. The moment people stop being afraid, everything collapses. And we had stopped being afraid. Diana Walsh filed the temporary guardianship petition within 48 hours. Mom was served. The next morning, I'll never forget the voicemail she left on my phone later that day. "You manipulative little brat. You brainwashed your brother. He belongs with his mother, not in some shoebox apartment in New York where you're playing dress up as a designer. You think you can steal him from me? Watch me fight." She hung up before I could say anything. It didn't matter. Her words were already evidence. Dad, for the first time in 22 years of marriage, didn't defend her. In fact, he did the opposite. He called me that night from his car outside their house. "I can't stay," he said quietly. "I can't look at her. I should have protected you both years ago." It was the first time I ever heard my father cry. The following week, he filed for legal separation. Mom's fury went from simmering to volcanic. But the court didn't care about her anger. They cared about Kelvin's injuries, the CPS report, the medical documentation, and the pattern of abuse Diana meticulously laid out. In the first hearing, the judge granted temporary guardianship to me. Dad retained parental rights. Mom was allowed only supervised visitation. She never showed up for a single one. Instead, she chose a different battlefield. She called my boss. "She's unstable," Mom told him. "She kidnapped my son. She's mentally unfit to work." My boss, a grumpy but kind man who loved design more than people, called me into his office. "She tried this?" he asked after recounting the call. "Yes," I whispered, ashamed, even though I'd done nothing wrong. He leaned back, sighed. "My sister pulled the same thing when I helped my niece escape a toxic home. Don't worry, your job's safe." She called my landlord. "She's harboring a minor illegally?" Mom claimed. "You need to evict her." My landlord, a mother of 2 teenage boys, sent me a text afterward. "Don't worry about her. Focus on your brother. We're fine here." She even called Dad's workplace. "He's an unfit father. He abandoned his family." Dad's boss replied with a simple email. "We support you during this difficult time. Take what time you need." Mom wasn't just losing battles. She was humiliating herself. And people were noticing. Mom's workplace, the prestigious healthcare consulting firm where she'd been a senior executive, had always shielded her. She was known for her sharp efficiency, her flawless presentations, her obsession with results. But behind the polished veneer were years of HR complaints quietly ignored because her numbers were good. The moment the news of the abuse case circulated, those complaints resurfaced. Employees stepped forward, nurses she'd berated, analysts she'd humiliated, assistants she'd driven to tears. A formal investigation opened. Weeks later, she was called into a closed-door meeting. They offered her a choice: early retirement or termination. She threatened to sue, called it discrimination, injustice, persecution. They fired her on the spot. Her email access was revoked before she reached the parking lot. She went from a respected executive to unemployed and infamous within days. With Dad's separation came the forensic accounting Diana recommended. That woman had been living a financial lie. Second mortgage, maxed out credit cards, designer handbags she'd hidden receipts for, spa weekends billed as professional retreats, thousands spent on holiday parties and image-boosting events. All of it masked behind Dad's steady income. The judge wasn't kind. Assets were divided legally, not emotionally. Mom received the house, but with the requirement to refinance and buy out Dad's portion. Banks took one look at her new status, unemployed, disgraced, and said, no. She scraped by on a retail job she was forced to take at Nordstrom Rack, folding sweaters under fluorescent lights for a fraction of her former salary. Her perfect life was collapsing piece by piece. Marissa, Kelvin, and the rise from the ashes. While Mom spiraled downward, our lives, slowly, painfully, beautifully, began to rebuild themselves. Kelvin therapy changed him. The Manhattan music program recognized his talent immediately. Within months, his instructors insisted he apply to Juilliard pre-college. He got in, full scholarship. I cried harder than he did. He started performing at small jazz clubs in Greenwich Village, his guitar case propped open beside him. People actually paid to hear him play. I'd sit in the back, heart swelling like it might burst. Look at him, Dad whispered one night. He's free. Dad. He rented a small apartment in Hoboken. He started cooking again. Real meals, not survival dinners. And then he met Patricia, a librarian. Soft eyes, laugh like warm bread. She treated him with a gentleness I hadn't realized he'd been starved for. One night, watching them cook together, I realized my father had never truly been happy before. My work finally started to feel right. I got promoted to senior designer. One of my pieces was featured in a small Vogue spread. When I saw my name in print, my throat closed up, not out of pride, out of defiance. Mom had said design was a hobby, that it would never pay off, that I would regret not choosing law. And yet here I was, building a life I chose. Ethan, he stayed with me through the worst of it. Hospital nights, court dates, panic attacks, Kel's nightmares. But as Kelvin stabilized, something in our relationship loosened. We loved each other, but in different directions. He wanted to travel more. I needed to stay grounded for Kelvin. Neither of us was wrong. One night, sitting in my living room, surrounded by fabric swatches, he said, "We're growing different, aren't we?" I nodded. We parted gently, respectfully, still grateful. For once, a relationship didn't end in bitterness. A year later, she sent me a long email. Claimed she'd changed, was in therapy, wanted another chance. Kelvin deleted his copy immediately. Dad blocked her address. Me? I saved the email. I didn't reply. Some bridges, once burned, don't lead anywhere worth walking back to. 7 months after the night of the beating, we stood in a courtroom bathed in cold morning light. Mom sat alone on her side. No allies, no husband, no children. When the judge spoke, his voice echoed. Ms. Whitaker, the evidence demonstrates a sustained pattern of abuse. Full custody is granted to Ms. Marissa Whitaker as guardian. The father retains full parental rights. You will have no unsupervised contact with the minor child. Mom shot to her feet. You can't do this. He's my son. Sit down, the judge warned. She sat, but her glare burned holes through the world. Outside the courthouse, Dad gathered Kelvin and me into a shaky hug. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice cracking. I should have protected you sooner. Kelvin leaned into him. You are now. That's what matters. Mom's fall felt like a tragedy, but not for her. For the girl I used to be, the one who believed she had no choice but to obey. For the boy Kelvin used to be, the one who thought dreams were shameful. For my father, the man who spent decades being small so she could feel big. Her collapse wasn't cruel justice. It was simply the truth finally catching up. And the truth never loses. The months after the custody verdict felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. Like the air after a storm, when everything is still in the wrong place, but the sky has finally stopped shaking. Mom had been legally cut out of Kelvin's daily life. No unsupervised visits, no late-night phone calls, no more threats, screaming, or manipulation. She was a ghost with a court order attached. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. We began to rebuild. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but honestly. Healing isn't linear, but Kelvin attacked it with the same intensity he once used to master scales on his guitar. Therapy gave him language he'd never had before. Words for fear, guilt, pressure, the impossible weight of trying to live someone else's dream. He started walking into sessions hunched and quiet, but week by week, his shoulders straightened. His music changed too. It stopped sounding like escape and started sounding like truth, raw, vulnerable, alive. His teachers at the Manhattan School of Music pre-college program were stunned. They called him extraordinary, prodigious, the kind of talent you don't teach, you only guide. He submitted a composition portfolio on a whim. Juilliard accepted it with a full scholarship. When he opened the email, he didn't scream or jump or cry. He just stared at the screen in silence. "Kel?" I whispered. "Are you okay?" He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I didn't know life could feel this good." I hugged him until he laughed. Dad rented a small apartment in Hoboken, close enough to join us for weekly dinners, but far enough to feel like his own person for the first time since his 20s. He started smiling more, a real smile, not the stiff one he used to wear like armor. He started cooking, taking long walks, listening to jazz because Kelvin says it helps the soul. And then he met Patricia, a librarian, 49, soft-spoken but with a quiet strength that could stop a hurricane. They met when Dad returned a late book and apologized too many times. She laughed and told him he wasn't the first man afraid of overdue fees. Their first date was coffee. Their second was a walk by the river. By the fifth, Kelvin was asking if Dad was glowing or if he just bought new moisturizer. One evening, I watched them cook together, Dad chopping onions, while Patricia teased him about his uneven slices, and something inside me loosened. For the first time, I saw my father loved in a way that didn't make him smaller. My career blossomed in ways I never expected. After the Vogue spread, one of my designs was featured at a boutique show in Soho. Then a celebrity stylist requested a custom piece. Then a small pop-up offered me a collaboration. I worked myself ragged, late nights, early mornings, bolts of fabric, stacked like skyscrapers around my apartment. But it felt different now. Not pressure, purpose. I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was building something toward my future. 2 years after Kelvin moved in, I launched my own design boutique. Just a small studio, just a modest collection. But it was mine. Everything Mom said I would never achieve, I was doing on my own terms. Ethan stayed through the darkest parts, the hospital nights, the hearings, the phone calls that still made Kelvin freeze. He was kind, patient, steady. But as Kelvin healed, our paths began to diverge. He wanted to travel more, take long assignments abroad, chase stories in places where internet was optional and danger was common. I couldn't leave. Not yet, maybe not for a long time. One night, as we sat on my sofa surrounded by fabric scraps and legal documents, he said gently, "We're growing in different directions, aren't we?" I nodded, and for once a heartbreak didn't feel like failure. It felt like honesty. We parted with gratitude instead of bitterness. Sometimes love lasts. Sometimes it transforms. Sometimes it bows out gracefully when two lives are meant to evolve separately. Word spread in our old Virginia neighborhood. The woman who once hosted charity luncheons, who bragged about her children's perfect futures, who judged everyone else's parenting, was now working retail, folding clearance sweaters under fluorescent lights. She tried renting rooms in the house to cover the mortgage, but her reputation preceded her. No one wanted to live with the woman who'd beaten her son until he bled. 3 months later, she sold the house far below value. After paying off debts, she walked away with nearly nothing. Her friends stopped calling. Her colleagues forgot her. Her book club dissolved without her. She moved into a modest apartment in Dale City, alone. I heard from a neighbor she goes to church now, sits in the back, leaves before anyone approaches her. I don't feel sorry for her. I don't hate her either. She exists somewhere in the distance, a lesson more than a person. A past tense. She emailed us last year. A long message filled with phrases like, "I've changed. I'm going to therapy. I see now that I made mistakes." She asked to reconnect, to have another chance, to meet Kelvin when he's ready. Kelvin read 2 lines and deleted it. Dad blocked her address. Natalie didn't even entertain the idea. As for me, I read the whole thing, twice. Then I closed my laptop. Some doors stay locked because opening them only invites the darkness back in. Forgiveness doesn't require reunion. Closure doesn't require conversation. I can wish her healing without allowing her into the life she once tried to control. I'm 31. Kelvin is 26. Dad married Patricia last fall. The wedding was small. 20 people, fairy lights strung along the backyard fence, simple vows that made everyone cry. Kelvin played guitar during the ceremony. I designed Patricia's dress, soft silk, embroidered with tiny ivy leaves. That night, Dad pulled us aside and said, "This is the family I always hoped for." We still do Sunday dinners, sometimes at Dad and Patricia's place in Hoboken, sometimes at my apartment, sometimes at Kelvin's studio in Brooklyn, where the walls are plastered with sheet music. We argue about music, we laugh about old memories, we cry over things we survived. And sometimes when the evening light hits Kelvin's guitar just right, I feel a swell of gratitude so large it almost hurts. We saved each other, piece by piece, day by day. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Sometimes I think about who we might have become if we had stayed silent, if Kelvin had folded under the pressure, if I'd never come home that night, if Dad had chosen comfort over courage. If someone in your family was destroying your future to control you, would you fight back, even if it meant losing them forever? For us, the answer was yes, and I would make the same choice every time, because the family you lose is never worth the person you'd have to become to keep them.